potent odor of rotting garbage and stagnant water assaulted their senses the moment Ray pushed open the rusted manhole cover. Jamil coughed as he descended the ladder, boots clanging on each rung. Harriet was last, angling the flashlight strapped to her wrist so it wouldn't catch the eyes of any unsuspecting passerby above. Together, they stepped into the gloom of the labyrinth hidden beneath the city's sewer system. Water dripped from bulging pipes overhead, forming steady rivulets that disappeared down dark channels. The air was thick and humid, tasting of moss and decay. There were rumors all around town, tales of a hidden world under the streets, of passages that defied mapping, and of a monstrous guardian that prowled in the dark. Yet, despite the risk, the three adventurers had come for reasons of their own. For too many nights, Ray had dreamt of twisting corridors and voices whispering in archaic tongues. She caught glimpses of a horned shadow skulking behind slimy walls. She could never quite remember the creature's features, only that it was massive, pungent with an otherworldly aura, and that it wanted something from her. When she told Jamil about her dreams, he laughed at first, calling them nightmares conjured by junk food eaten too late. But he changed his tune when Harriet discovered an unsolved string of disappearances near a particular block. The manhole in that alley led to an uncharted section of the sewer. Something about Harriet's voice, trembling just a bit, convinced Jamil that this might be more than just imagination. Down in the tunnels, light graffitied the algae-slick walls where urban explorers or bold artists had once ventured. Strange, esoteric symbols peered at them, resembling arcane runes. Harriet paused to examine one with her gloved hand. "This is no ordinary graffiti," she murmured. "It's like someone was trying to seal something in or mark a path." She ran a finger lightly over the lines, feeling the grooves that had been carved into the concrete. Ray saw goosebumps forming on Harriet's forearm. Ray's flashlight died for a split second, flickered, then buzzed back to life. Reflexively, Jamil's hand moved toward the holster at his waist, though Ray knew he was only carrying flares. Under normal circumstances, Jamil was calm and fearless. But here in the damp underbelly of the city, something had unsettled him enough to keep his body on edge, ready to spring. Ray and Harriet exchanged a glance, and Harriet squeezed Ray's shoulder, urging them both onward. Deeper they went. The corridors distorted any sound that reached their ears, bouncing echoes of quiet dripping, scurrying rats, and their own careful footfalls. Occasionally Harriet would pause, flipping through the battered leather notebook she'd brought. In it she compiled city planning outlines, half-rumored sightings of spectral creatures, and archaic references to labyrinths used by ancient cults. She'd gleaned from her research that an even older foundation lay beneath the city's modern layout, a web that predated the sewer system and was rumored to be guarded by a beast. These half-legend, half-fact morsels gave them purpose amidst the oppressive gloom. Then, almost imperceptibly, the corridor opened onto a wide chamber. At first, it looked like just another sewer junction, but Harriet held her flashlight high, revealing stone arches and columns that dwarfed them with their scale. The walls were carved with runes Ray didn't recognize. In the center of the chamber, a fountain-like structure rose from the murky water, its base carved with swirling serpents and monstrous faces. Had it been made of marble, it might have been a relic from a lost empire, but the stone was black with age, coated in slick film, and as they drew closer, they realized the carvings depicted not just serpents, but a horned creature, part man, part beast, striding through labyrinthine corridors. A sense of dread swept over Ray. She pressed a hand against her chest, her heart racing. A drop of water struck the unholy fountain, and the echo seemed unnaturally resonant, as though the structure were hollow and hungry for more than just moisture. "Come on," whispered Harriet. "There might be another passage on the far side." She directed them around the fountain, stepping carefully to avoid whatever silt-laden sludge lay beneath the surface of the water. Emil's voice came low and urgent. "We're being watched." They froze. Ray risked a glance over her shoulder. At first, she saw only shifting shadows. Then something blinked, a reflection of an eye catching Harriet's flashlight beam. A heavy hiss reverberated from an adjoining corridor. Their silent observer retreated, leaving only an echo of wet footsteps. Tension gripped them. For a moment, Ray wanted to turn back, but Harriet insisted on pressing onward, determined to uncover the truth, the records, the knowledge which had consumed her research. Jamil's jaw flexed, and he pursed his lips, acquiescing. The three of them navigated past the fountain, the monstrous stone faces seeming to grey in the flickering light. Once through the chamber, they discovered a labyrinth of connected corridors, many blocked by collapsed masonry or sealed with ancient iron gates. Their progress slowed. The air was heavier here, tinged with an earthy smell like damp soil that had lain unspoiled for centuries. Occasionally, Harriet tore pages from her notebook, leaving them at intersections so they could trace their steps if they needed to backtrack. The tension in their group remained palpable. Jamil's eyes flickered from corridor to corridor, searching for any sign of the Watcher. The deeper they ventured, the clearer it became that the architecture around them wasn't purely modern. Doors without modern hinges swung open on silent archways, leading to antechambers of unknown origin. Some walls were decorated with archaic symbols reminiscent of the ones Harriet had seen earlier, while other sections looked smoothly carved out of the bedrock. Their flashlights occasionally revealed scrawls in fresh chalk or muddy footprints that might have belonged to other explorers, but many of these faint traces ended abruptly, as though the explorers had vanished into thin air. Their footsteps splashed in shallow rivulets as they entered a corridor that snaked for what felt like miles. The stench of ammonia hit them like a physical barrier, forcing them to cover their mouths. In the distance, a low growl rippled through the wet darkness. The beast was near. They exchanged uneasy glances. "We've got to keep moving," Harriet breathed. "It's drawing us in." Ray felt something brush against her leg, and she nearly cried out. A translucent membrane of slick algae had snagged her boot, and she kicked it away with a shudder. She'd seldom felt so vulnerable. Her usual bravado felt meaningless in the face of whatever horror roamed these corridors. Even Jamil, with his stoic facade, had worry etched onto his face. Harriet tried to keep them focused, her voice hushed but determined. She kept scanning the notebook, consulting whatever cryptic sketches she'd made of potential pathways. At times, those sketches seemed to match the labyrinth's turns, guiding them forward. It was Jamil who first heard the scraping of claws against stone. The sound seemed to come from all around, as though the sprawling labyrinth itself were alive. With a silent gesture, he urged Harriet and Ray to douse their flashlights. They crouched, cloaked in oppressive darkness. A faint green luminescence emanated from patches of bioluminescent fungus, just enough for them to make out each other's silhouettes. For a moment, Ray thought she saw a pair of amber eyes gleaming farther down the corridor, reflecting the faint fungal glow. But when she blinked, there was only blackness. In that suffocating silence, the beast made its move. A thunderous roar erupted from somewhere behind them, reverberating through the passage. Harriet let out a choked gasp, and Jamil swung around to ignite a flare. The corridor flared red, revealing the silhouette of a hulking creature. Its fur-laced limbs were far larger than any man's, and its face was distorted by matted hair and curling horns that almost scraped the ceiling. The guardian of the labyrinth stared them down with eyes that shone with malevolent intelligence. Time seemed to slow. The beast roared again, saliva dripping from fangs that glistened in the flaring light. It charged forward, water splashing in its path. Instinct demanded they run, so they did. Harriet grabbed Ray's hand, pulling her along, while Jamil lagged behind to toss his flare at the monster. A sudden burst of light startled the creature, buying them precious seconds. Adrenaline fueled their sprint as they careened into narrower side tunnels. Behind them, the beast's footsteps fell like hammer blows. It barreled through the corridor, smashing chunks of stone from the archways. Harriet's improvised map suggested a possible safe room, a sealed chamber rumored to be constructed by the Labyrinth's original architect. If they could reach it, maybe they could block the entrance or at least slow the monster down. Racing through the twisting dark, they finally spotted a massive wooden door reinforced with metal strips. The wood was rotted in places, but still looked formidable. Jamil threw his weight against it. It opened with a groan, revealing a large circular space ringed by shelves hewn out of the rock. Symbols covered the walls, some glowing faintly with the same greenish bioluminescence as the funk. Ray slipped inside, Harriet after her, and Jamil dragged the door shut. The instant it closed, the monstrous guardian's roar echoed, so near they could feel the trembling in the floor. They braced themselves against the door. As expected, the creature slammed into it from the other side. Screws popped, and a streak of splintered wood appeared. "Hold it!" Harriet cried, struggling to push back with all her strength. Ray felt the door jerk, threatening to tear from its hinges. Another slam, and then the roars receded slightly. The Guardian seemed to be pacing outside, waiting for an opportunity. The three explorers collapsed to the damp floor, hearts pounding like frantic drums. Breathing heavily, Harriet fumbled for her flashlight, illuminating the chamber. It appeared to be some sort of study, or a repository of dark arcana. Ancient yellowed papers lay strewn across the shelves, along with clay tablets inscribed with the Labyrinth's symbol. In the center of the room was an altar-like platform, etched with swirling designs that glowed faintly. Drawing a trembling breath, Harriet approached the altar. "Look at these inscriptions," she whispered, shining the beam on the carvings. "They talk about a guardian that was bound centuries ago to keep intruders out, or keep something in." She traced the designs. "There's more. It says that once the labyrinth chooses its prey, it guides them deeper until they reach the heart. That's where the guardian can devour them, or demand fealty." "Demand fealty?" Jamil repeated hoarsely. He glanced at Ray, uneasy confusion playing across his features. "What does it want from us?" Ray turned away from the altar, her gaze falling on the shelves. She noticed a battered journal, leather bounds cracked with age. Its front displayed a stylized labyrinth design. She flipped it open, scanning the shaky handwriting. Each entry chronicled an explorer's journey through these tunnels. The last few entries spoke of glimpses of the Guardian, how it relentlessly pursued them. One passage described the labyrinth as a living entity that could shift and rearrange itself to usher victims to their doom. The final page contained a hastily scrawled warning. "The labyrinth hungers, the beast obeys. Only the chosen sacrifice or the rightful vow can break this vicious cycle." Jamil and Harriet crowded around Ray. Harriet read out loud, "We are the labyrinth's next victims. If we don't find a way to either appease the Guardian or break the cycle, it will never stop coming for us." From outside came the steady scrape of claws on stone. It was circling, waiting for them to re-emerge. Jamil swallowed hard. "We're cornered. Even if we tried to sneak out, it'd catch our scent. We need another way, some hidden passage or a protective ward. Something." He broke away to examine the room's walls. At the far side of the chamber, Harriet noticed a panel in the rock, faintly outlined in chalk. She tugged at it, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a concealed passage. The faint echo of running water came from within. "Let's see where it goes," she said, voice hushed. Though none of them wanted to face the labyrinth's monstrous sentinel again, they also knew staying in the chamber might only delay the inevitable. They slipped into the secret passage, guided by Harriet's flashlight. It descended sharply, leading to a narrower tunnel flanked by ancient pillars carved with the same runic text. Water trickled in from above, forming a small stream that ran along their feet. The air grew colder, laced with a metallic tang like old blood. Ray gritted her teeth, scanning for any sign of the Guardian. She felt it in her bones. They were venturing closer to the labyrinth's core. A rhythmic pulse seemed to fill the air, like a distant heartbeat. As the passage opened out, the three explorers found themselves in a grand cavern, the ceiling arching high above. At the cavern's center rose a stone platform, similar to the fountain they'd seen earlier, but larger. Streams of filthy water cascaded from openings overhead, spiraling around the platform before draining into bottomless pits. Runes glowed with an eerie luminescence, illuminating a horned effigy at the center. A statue of the beast itself. Harriet and Jamil approached cautiously, but Ray was drawn forward as though enchanted. She laid a hand on the statue's base, and a jolt tore through her, a crackling discharge of energy. Her flashlight died, replaced by the flickering glow of runes along the cavern walls. Harriet lunged to pull Ray back, but Ray held her position, transfixed. She felt a presence pressing into her mind, ancient and relentless. A monstrous roar boomed from the tunnel behind them. The Guardian was here. Water churned around the entrance as the creature emerged, eyes blazing with primal fury. Jamil rushed forward, flare in hand, but the beast ignored him, its focus fixed on Ray. The Labyrinth had chosen her. It was as if the creature recognized something within, Ray a spark or potential, and it snarled, horns lowered. Harriet and Jamil positioned themselves between Ray and the beast. They shouted warnings, tried to draw its attention away, but their efforts were futile. The Guardian launched itself at them with terrifying speed, swiping at Jamil with a massive claw. Jamil dove sideways just in time, though the beast's talons grazed his leg. Harriet scrambled to help him, brandishing a broken length of pipe in a trembling grip. Ray, meanwhile, stood at the statue, a faint, shimmering aura around her. She recalled her dreams, the labyrinth, the whispering runes. She remembered feeling as though the labyrinth was beckoning her, entwining her fate with its twisted corridors. Now, in the heart of this domain, she sensed the labyrinth's sorrow, its hunger, its yearning for a release from an eternity of devouring intruders. She closed her eyes and placed both hands against the cold stone. Her voice trembled as she spoke ancient syllables she didn't consciously know, but the labyrinth did, and it guided her tongue. The Guardian roared again, but its aggression faltered, as if an invisible force compelled it to hesitate. Harriet seized the opportunity to drag Jamil to safer ground. He winced in pain, blood trickling from the shallow cuts on his leg. The beast's eyes flicked between Ray and the statue. Rage and confusion warred in its monstrous gaze. Summoning nerve she never knew she had, Ray opened her eyes. "Guardian," she spoke, each syllable resonating. "You who keep watch, you who roam the halls of the labyrinth. I speak the words of the old wards. Hear me now. The chain must be unbound." The words rippled through the chamber like an electrical charge. The swirling water churned faster, and the runes lit with fierce intensity. The beast howled, bowing its head as though in agony. Harriet watched in awe. Something profound was happening in that chamber. An ancient rite half lost in time. Jamil, gritting his teeth, pressed a hand against the wound on his leg, determined not to cry out. Ray pressed her palms harder against the statue, continuing the incantation. She offered a vow not of fealty but of release, a promise to ease the labyrinth's torment. With each spoken phrase, the statue's eyes glowed white-hot. The monstrous Guardian roared, smashing its fists against the stone floor, sending cracks spidering outward. The labyrinth itself seemed to quake in response. A final burst of energy exploded from the effigy, sending Ray stumbling backward. Her eardrums rang. The runes for a moment flared bright as a sun. Then the entire cavern plunged into darkness. Damp silence reigned. Harriet scrambled for her flashlight, which flickered back to life. There, in the muted glow, they saw the Guardian collapse to its knees. The wild fury was gone from its eyes. Slowly, it began to dissolve, like a phantom in the gloom, its form drifting into swirling black tendrils that vanished upon touching the floor. Panting, Ray stayed on the ground, head bowed in exhaustion. Harriet ran to her side, hugging Ray while tears of relief slipped down her cheeks. Jamil limped over, leaning on the pipe Harriet had dropped. The cavern was still. Where the Guardian had knelt, a faint shimmer lingered, then disappeared entirely. Ray felt the labyrinth's presence recede from her mind, leaving behind a whisper of gratitude. She realized it was free. From an ancient cycle that forced it to feed on unsuspecting intruders, they helped each other to stand on the unsteady ground. Water continued to flow around them, but the menacing gloom no longer felt suffocating. Harriet eyed the statue, now inert. "I think we broke the cycle," she whispered. "That creature, it's gone." Jamil exhaled, leaning on the pipe. "We need to get out of here, and we need a hospital for my leg." He gave a wry smile, trying to hide the pain. The labyrinth no longer resisted their steps. As if guided by some benevolent hand, they found corridors that led, in surprisingly short order, to a familiar junction. Harriet discovered her torn notebook pages at an intersection, then spotted the rusted ladder leading up. Dawn light seeped through the edges of the manhole. They ascended carefully, Jamil grimacing with every step, until they felt the cool morning air on their faces. One by one they emerged onto an empty street, the rising sun bathing them in a gentler, more forgiving light. Ray was the last to climb out. She paused at the threshold, glancing back down into the darkness. The memory of the labyrinth's haunting presence remained. She wondered if it would remain a place of hidden danger, or if, now released from its ancient burden, it might simply collapse into dormant tunnels. Quietly, she said a small, silent farewell to the entity that had haunted her dreams. Then she replaced the manhole cover and stood up. Harriet had already dialed for an ambulance on her phone. Jamil was sitting on the curb, pressing a rag to his leg. He offered Ray a nod. "We made it," he said tiredly. They heard sirens in the distance, the mundane world rushing back in around them. Passers-by might have stared at the trio, their clothes sodden and their faces streaked with grime and exhaustion. But Ray didn't care. The tension of that subterranean chase was still fresh in her mind, yet it had yielded something precious: understanding, release, and the possibility that dark cycles, no matter how ancient, could be broken. Harriet approached, setting a gentle hand on Ray's shoulder. "We'll have a lot to tell the authorities, though I doubt anyone will believe the supernatural parts. But we're alive. That must mean something." Ray closed her eyes for a moment. She still felt the echo of the labyrinth's power, though it was quieter now, like a sleeping giant lulled back into peaceful rest. When she opened her eyes again, the sky above glowed in the early sunlight. Water dripped from her clothes in a slow, steady rhythm, mirroring the memory of those ancient corridors. "Yes," she agreed, voice steady. "It means we're free." She and Harriet helped Jamil to his feet, and together they walked down the street, guided by the approaching ambulance. Their city might never fully know what slumbered or awakened in its depths, but the labyrinth no longer prowled for victims, no longer demanded tribute. In somewhere, in the recesses of Ray's mind, she sensed that if the labyrinth stirred again, it would remember her voice, remember that fleeting moment of release and the vow they had made. Though exhausted, they glanced back one last time at the manhole they had emerged from. This time there was no oppressive hush, no lurking guardian. Only the faint swirl of wind across the pavement. Their footsteps carried them onward to the promise of a new morning, leaving the once terrifying labyrinth behind. Yet each of them knew that the ties between the hidden world below and the city above lingered, bonds woven into the streets, the foundations, and the collective memory of those who dared to explore the unknown.